The many causes of obesity and its consequences are in the news again. Who would expect adolescents to have metabolic syndrome and brain dysfunction as a consequence of obesity?
Yeah, it's hard to believe. But a study was done out of New York University that was published in the journal Pediatrics on 49 teenagers who had metabolic syndrome and 62 that didn't. But of those 62, 40% of them were still obese, but didn't have all the qualifications for metabolic syndrome, which include hypertension, abdominal obesity,
high triglycerides,
low HDL,
and
high insulin levels.
large abdomens,
right,
in proportion to the rest of their body.
Yeah, their waist to hip ratio is too high. So when we found that, and they measured to see how these kids were doing in school, found that they had lower scores in math and spelling and reading, their attention span was low, and they had a hard time thinking as clearly as some of the other kids. They just weren't that flexible.
I'll bet you anything that a lot of these kids are misdiagnosed as having learning disabilities.
Wouldn't surprise me a bit, because a lot of it's just the same. But the thing about this study is that you would think it would happen in adults, because if somebody's had it for a long time and there's time for damage to occur to the tissues of the body because of the free radical damage that occurs in metabolic syndrome, that would be something you could expect. But in kids, to have it develop that fast is kind of a shock.
You know what's interesting, too, is that many of the schools have phased out PE in favor of academia.
Right.
And what's going on is that these kids are not getting the exercise, and then what kind of diet do they eat at lunch, in the
look at
lunches?
School foods. Most of the time they've got high carbohydrate diets that are full of high fructose corn syrup. And really, with the business you mentioned about exercise, that's like the double whammy.
So it's just conflicting with what they really want. What their goal is for the kids to do better in school, and instead they're cutting out the PE, and then the kids are getting this brain dysfunction from obesity because they haven't been getting enough exercise,
exactly,
along with a better diet. So
we need to do something about prevention. In this country, we expect the regulations to come from the top down, but what we need to do is start working at the local level and doing things to make sure that the schools are serving healthy food, healthy lunches. We know that studies that were done about 25 years ago in New York from a fellow named Schoenthaler showed that when you just fed one healthy meal to kids or to people who were in prisons, that the violence rate went down by 44%. So we're looking at a factor here that's not just a problem for the person who is having the diet that's bad and it has a metabolic syndrome, but also for the safety of the community.
And also keep in mind that metabolic syndrome reduces insulin resistance.
It increases.
It increases insulin resistance, and as a result, many of these people are going to be getting diabetes.
Exactly. So we have a pre-epidemic here starting in the teenage years that we need to do something about. So more exercise, diet that's better, more sleep. You would think that sleep wouldn't be much of a factor there, but it is, because of the stress that our body feels from adrenaline and noradrenaline and cortisol. The hormonal effects can make you much more susceptible to having problems with metabolic syndrome. So if we do all these things and take responsibility for it and bring back good food and good exercise to our kids in school, chances are we're going to have less of a problem here, and our kids are going to be a lot smarter.